Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Today, we have the guitar that PRS sued Gibson over and won. And we also have one that was only rumored to exist. Nouveau by Gibson. So to understand why this guitar is actually so rare, we need to do a little bit of history here. Back in the day, Epiphone was a big competitor of Gibson's. I mean, Epiphones were more popular at one point in time, believe it or not. But in the late 50s, around 1957, the fierce rivalry ended when Gibson acquired them. Now, for a few years, they still produced guitars under the Epiphone brand within the USA. But in the 70s, they basically became Gibson's import brand. That's when cool things like the Epiphone scroll was made. But in the 80s, there was a short stint when they tried to bring Epiphone, or at least a few lineups of Epiphone, to the USA. I talked about those guitars in the Gibson Spirit episode, but just as a quick recap, those Kalamazoo-made Epiphones are the Map, the SG, and the Spirit. They're kind of cool guitars, but they didn't sell too well. So eventually some of them were just straight up rebranded Gibson, and then the Gibson lineups just kind of took off from there. But, you know, the 80s was a dark time for Gibson. In 1985, Gibson was sold, so we went from the Norlin era to the Juskowitz era, which just recently ended. And the beginning of the Henry J era is a very crazy time, where a bunch of weird stuff came out of Gibson. We're talking like all these different super strats and pretty much nothing stock. But it was also at this time when Gibson acquired Steinberger. They bought them out around 1987. It took a few years to get everything finalized there, but it's also around this time in 1985 when a competitor named PRS started opening their doors. So with Gibson under new management, they had an idea to birth a new lineup of guitars called Nouveau. They would have the guitars built overseas but assembled in Nashville so they could market them as made in USA, which was a common practice at the time. Fender did similar things. Check out the Prodigy video for a little more info on that. But the whole Nouveau brand did not take off. You'll find some acoustics out there. I mean, they're readily available in comparison to this one, but this guitar was only rumored to exist in marketing materials and a few prototypes. But the guitar still lived on, but they rebranded it under the Epiphone name. Now, why did they do that? We're not really sure at this point in time. Maybe it just came down to brand awareness. Maybe people knew Epiphones better than this whole Nouveau thing, because Nouveau just means new, up to date. So this branding can really only be found in the late 80s, more specifically 1986 till about 1987, before being rebranded as Epiphone. So most of these that you'll find are Epiphone branded, Epiphone by Gibson. But what they designed was a mahogany neck-through guitar with mahogany wings and quilty maple tops and ebonol fretboards. And they called them the Spotlight. And hey, does this shape look familiar at all to that new company just starting to break down barriers in 1985? Yeah, this is just a PRS ripoff. And did they get away with it? No. PRS sued their butts, they gave them a cease and desist, it's over. That's why you'll only find these in 1988. But this was a very shortly lived production run. And you'll find rumors online of like there's only 10 or 100 of these things out there. That's not exactly true. I'm sure there's probably about 1,000 or so of these things. Because as we were talking about earlier, they weren't actually made in the US. A lot of sources will tell you these were Japanese made, but that's been refuted by some people that have little stickers that say made in Korea on them. So maybe some were Japanese made, some were Korean made. But you can find them in white, red, black, and the most popular to me anyways is the natural finish. Because when you have the natural finish, that's when you can see all the beautiful figuring of the wood. You also can see the neck-through design, which I think looks really cool because it reminds me of my favorite model from Gibson in the 80s, the Spotlight Special. And you also get a sweet cherry back. How cool is this thing? But those had EMG select pickups with a Steinberger KBX tremolo unit on it, which, you know, if you check out this video, you'll know from the factory those things were defective. Essentially, the studs weren't welded in very well. It was made of cheap pot metal. They'll bend, they basically become unusable. But there was a different iteration out there that used a Strat-style tremolo system. They featured a master volume with a master tone that doubled as a coil split for the pickups on a push-pull pot, and you just had a 3-way selector switch. But since this one's actually branded Nouveau instead of Epiphone, it was only rumored to exist in marketing materials. So finding this guitar is actually really rare and tells us it was one of the early ones, potentially even a prototype, as you can tell by some of the unique features to this guitar. So this guitar kind of appeals to Epiphone collectors, it appeals to Gibson collectors, and it kind of even appeals to PRS collectors or somebody who wants a cheaper version of a PRS that's, something a little bit different. But to learn a little bit more about this mysterious Nouveau branded one, let's go ahead and throw it on the workbench to learn more about its individual parts. Inside the Spotlight Nouveau. We don't have EMG select pickups, that is beautiful. So that means at one point in time they actually planned on putting Gibson electronics in here. Now just by looking at this you might think, hey, are those Tim Shaw PAFs? They've got the brass screws, so that's looking good for them. I don't want to tear these pickups apart, but it even looks like you can just barely see the white spacers. But they don't have that braided shielding wiring, so I'm betting these are something similar that they were using in the Super Strat type guitars at this time. But still, you're guaranteed much better pickups than those EMG selects. Usually people will take those out. Within the circuit, the bridge pickup is a hot 9.37 k ohms. The neck position is 869. And then you can also coil split them right here, so you can get about half of those in each position. And the middle position, just for fun, you get about 4.55, and split that for even half of that. So those readings also tell me they're not Tim Shaw PAFs. But here's something I found really peculiar about this guitar. The neck pickup cavity is ridiculously sloppy. It's almost like somebody just did this route by hand. It's very uneven and looks ugly. But then you go to the bridge pickup cavity and it's looking okay for the most part. But you do have this weird indentation right here. So I'm not sure if this is an after the factory modification or if they were trying some different pickups out in here that needed a deeper route. But I do want you to be aware of that. I like how you can see just how figured the maple top is in the cavities though. That's kind of cool. They just have a small square channel right there. That's kind of interesting that they chose to run it through the neck through design instead of going through the body. Because then it exits out to the body cavity, but you can see there's actually another small little channel right there. It's hard to get the camera to focus there, but it seems to be a pretty deep route there. So maybe they just used a long drill bit and went straight through here. But this one, thankfully, has the Stratocaster style tremolo unit on it. We don't have to worry about the KBX on this one. That was kind of my one criteria for finding one of these spotlights to document, is I wanted this one because I don't ever want to have to deal with one of those again. The KBX is the bane of existence for late 80s Gibsons, because it's so hard to find certain models without them. I do not have the tremolo bar on it, but thankfully the one that Glary sent me does fit it. And now the control layout here. It's a little bit different from any other Spotlight. You still have your master volume right here. It's possible that this knob has been replaced because it really doesn't stay on too well. And then you have the three-way toggle switch in the middle. But what makes this one different from any other Spotlight I've ever seen is we don't have a tone knob. It's just the coil split. Eventually they put a coil split within the tone pot, so that definitely suggests that this is a very early prototype guitar. But something that's really interesting here is you've got the Gibson USA electronics here, right? But you can tell that these are definitely overseas plastic pickup rings. You've got really cheap plastics and electronics in here. I mean, look at that. Once we get inside, you'll see it even more. But man, did they use such a beautifully flamed maple top on this guy. I mean, some of these, they're pretty dull. Some of these are amazing. This one's definitely in the top percentile, I would say. Especially the treble side here. I love how dark and ambered it is, but you've got like a touch of red within the flame. It's really cool. And then, you can't normally see this, but it appears it's a three-piece mahogany neck. So you got like two lighter stripes and a darker stripe right here. But from far away, it just kind of all blends together. You don't necessarily notice that it's three different pieces. Now moving on to the neck here. Oh man, so I started cleaning this, right? And I thought my light was gonna catch on fire. I was smelling this burning smell. And then I went down and started sniffing the fretboard. It's like, oh, this fretboard smells like burning rubber. So then I looked it up. It's an ebonol fretboard. I thought for sure this was ebony. Then I did a little bit more research and found out it's ebonol. It's kind of similar to Richlight in a way. It's a plastic fretboard, but it's been used on a lot of guitars, especially in this era. It's honestly, it feels pretty nice, but it smells terrible when you're working on it. But notice these really cool V inlays here. We've got a nut width of 1.66 inches, and by the 12th fret, it's 1.99. First fret neck depth, 0.76, and that increases to 0.84 by the 12th, so it's a rather skinny neck. And now we move on to the face of the headstock. This is what makes this one so special. It's got the Nouveau branding. You know, all of them almost will say Epiphone up here, which honestly, it looks kind of cool because they used a similar font, but this is, you know, a shortly lived brand of Gibson that up until this day, we weren't even sure if one of these things truly existed. But it also has the Gibson branding right here. But take a look at this headstock. I mean, they were going for the straight string pull thing like the PRSs have, but it almost kind of looks like a heritage headstock the way it starts right here. It gets a little bit different down here, but you can definitely see the similarities. So maybe Gibson stole more ideas than just PRS on this one, because, you know, clearly this is a PRS body shape, and I never saw it in the photos. I just thought it was kind of a cool super strat-like thing, but playing this thing, oh my goodness, I have not had that many PRS guitars, and it just feels like a PRS. And they've captured these with the 25.5-inch scale length. So not traditional Gibson Epiphone stuff here. The nut appears to be some sort of black plastic, and your truss rod cover, it does have some scratches on it here, and it's just completely blank. And it's got that overseas style truss rod. It's rather stiff to adjust, but I was able to set the neck straight again. When I got it, it had a pretty significant bow in it, which kind of made the fretting around the 12th fret, you know, a little bit too high for my liking. So I've got this straight now, and I've got the action adjusted to the way I like it. But just know, you know, it's kind of a collectible guitar, but it's a little bit hard to work this truss rod. Now moving on to the back unfolds some more mysteries. I finally found out where that little route ends that we were discovering in that pickup cavity. You see it right there? So they must have drilled it straight through here somehow. And you also see these 6 mysterious holes. I'm not quite sure what those are for, but they do line up with the 6 screw holes for the trem system. But if you look right under here, you can see there's a bare screw hole. So it's almost like they kind of experimented with a few different trem systems on here. So that's kind of interesting to note. But other than that, it just seems like a pretty basic setup here. You've got 3 springs, your grounding wire, and you can adjust it right there. But then this is what kind of baffled me, as I was talking about earlier. They took the time to give it nice, you know, Gibson pickups, but the switches and stuff in here are all very cheap. It's just a very tiny little pot right there. I can't quite make out what it says. I see a 6-1W, and that's about it. And then you've got your toggle switch here. Yeah, that's not what we're used to seeing in a Gibson product. And then your coil split right there. Then your output jack is right here along the side. They did a pretty good job of hiding the neck through on the back, because since it's also a mahogany body on the wings, it just kind of blends in, but you can just barely see it right here. In this bright studio lighting, you can kind of see it a little bit better, but even at the edges, if you really get on it, you can see the 3 pieces of mahogany here. And this bottom strap button, I mean, it looks okay centered from this angle, right? But when you view it from the top, you can tell, yeah, they missed their mark by just a little bit. But moving on here, this one has a sticker serial number of UG4523600. Sometimes people won't have any stickers on their guitar at all. Sometimes they'll have a sticker that says Made in Korea. Some people have even found like a serial number up here. This one does not have that, but it does have a factory second stamp. So that's just kind of a mystery of a Spotlight, but here you can kind of see that 3-piece mahogany neck. I've never really noticed it on the neck before until right now. But I think what's really funny here is the headstock. It's just like some sort of jigsaw. So your main portion of the neck right here just kind of started there, then they kind of sloped it off and then went through the body, right? But then they have a piece of wood right here that's kind of grafted on, and then it looks like there's another small one grafted on. And then another little wing right here. So it's a bunch of pieces of wood to make up that headstock, but they did it. I'm ultimately wondering if that's the reason why this one was branded as a second, because that's a little bit unsightly. And seconds for Gibson anyways at this point in time just meant a finish blemish or some sort of light blemish. So I'd be willing to bet it's that, or one of these small dings that's on the guitar was there in the factory, or you know, it was a prototype guitar, they didn't want to sell it or whatever, who knows. But it's here now. And this example weighs 8 pounds, 4.1 ounces. Let's go ahead and plug it in and hear how it sounds. Tone-wise, the pickups are really hot, but they've responded very well to touch sensitivity. But I found, if I was just trying to play regularly, they really pushed my amp and made even the cleans sound dirty, so you gotta be careful while playing this guitar. The coil split, to me anyways, was pretty convincing, more so convincing than even modern day coil splits. It definitely has some Strat twanginess to it. So while these pickups in this one might not be for everybody, that's not what you're gonna find stock in most of these anyways. Now that we know all about the Epiphone Nouveau by Gibson Spotlight, what are my final thoughts on this thing? Well, I'm kind of biased because I like the whole Spotlight design look from Gibson when they have the neck-through design. This thing also reminds me of that electric guitar I had because that was also neck-through and had a cutaway similar to this. And this one's ultimately better than any other Spotlight that was ever birthed because, you've got the Gibson pickups in here instead of the EMG Selects. So I had a great time with this thing. I think build quality wise, yeah, you've got that big thick polyurethane finish on here, but it's definitely a beautiful guitar. I don't know if I would like the solid colored ones as much personally, but these natural ones are beautiful. And they're kind of taken off on the used market. You used to be able to pick these things up for a couple $100, but now that people are discovering these, you can rarely find them under 500 anymore. And times they go all the way up to 1,000. Now with this one being, a prototype Nouveau by Gibson, yeah, it's a collector's guitar. You're not gonna be able to get it that cheap. But it is for sale. This is actually a consignment piece, so I don't have the final say on the final sales price, but you can check out that link in the description that'll take you to the Reverb for sale page, and I can forward your offers to the owner. But let's go ahead and review its condition. Face of the headstock, it's pretty clean here. You've got some scratches, and definitely on the truss rod cover there's those scratches. Again, the truss rod, it's a little bit stiff to move, but I was able to set the neck up completely straight here. So you might want to dial in the action to your personal taste, but I've definitely got it nice and low, maybe actually a little bit too low. The Epiphone fretboard's in good shape. Your frets just show very minor wear. I just polished them up so you're good to go. I love these really cool inlays. But the story behind this one is he got it from a guy in Nashville who told him it was his stepfather's guitar. He basically just had it in a closet for 30 years. He wasn't able to get any more information based on that. But the reason why he could even find the Nouveau brand is he called up George Gruen about this guitar. And he's like, yeah, I've seen one of those before. You don't see too many of those. Basically, in his book is the only recorded evidence of this guitar even existing, the Nouveau branded Spotlight. So this is definitely a rare guitar that is meant for a collection of some sort. It's not really a player's grade one. But condition-wise here, you probably saw it as we were going over the top. There is a pretty nasty ding right here that's kind of impressed into the finish. There's a very small one right here. But as far as the rest of the top goes, you just kind of have some polishing scratches, stuff that would polish out besides those impressions. The pickups definitely appear to be stock and original to this guitar. Again, I question the originality of the knob, but there's other ones that look similar to this. The backside of the headstock, it is branded a factory second, so maybe that just meant it was a prototype. It could mean a bunch of different things, but traditionally it just meant something was wrong with the guitar cosmetically. The back of the neck, surprisingly good shape. Nothing too crazy going on here. Maybe a few minor light impressions on it, but your serial number sticker is still intact. It would be fairly easy to remove if you didn't want it, but I would not suggest that. As far as the back goes, there's just kind of a light ding right here. And other than that, you just kind of have some light scratches. I mean, if you took it to a professional buffer, polisher, out guy, you could probably get, just about everything on this guitar besides a few of those impressions out. Moving along the edges here, you do have some noticeable dings along the sides. And the biggest one is right here by the output jack. Somebody probably missed and dinged it right there. But besides, those few ones on the top, you got those few small ones on the side. I mean, it's in relatively clean shape, everything considered, being a 1987 made one of these. You've also got a concentration of scratches right there. Let's go ahead and view it under Blacklight. Yep, it glows a little bit, and the more I look at this knob, the more I can tell there is a little bit of age on it, so it likely is the original one. But we'll just take a quick swoop around here while it's a neon green color, I guess. It looks like we have a little bit of finish rubbed through right there. Maybe that just happened when they were making it, because you can kind of see there's also some of that evidence right here where kind of the neck heel is. As we go around the edges, you can see some similar scuffing. So maybe that was due to a case or a stand this thing had. I mean, I guess you feel a very slight difference now that you know about it. I mean, had I not seen that, I probably wouldn't have felt it. I guess you can see a small little ding right here now too. But something kind of scuffed the finish a little bit. I'm not quite sure what that's all about. But as long as you know about it, I've done my job right. You can see it glows a little bit more right here too. Very cool. So I don't see anything too out of the ordinary here. So it definitely passes the Blacklight test. This one comes in a non-original hard shell case. It's made by Guitar Research. You've got 1, 2, 3, and a pretty nice handle. It's a nice case. I mean, it's hard shell. I mean, it's nothing fantastic. It's not form-fitting, but it does its job. It's just kind of your typical Stratocaster-like case. Some of these did come originally in chainsaw cases, but with this one being like an earlier prototype, I mean, it's possible it never even had a case to begin with. I'm not 100% sure on this. But if you think you might be interested in this incredibly rare Nouveau by Gibson Spotlight guitar, you can check out that link in the description, which will take you to the Reverb for sale page. Thank you, Troglodytes, for tuning into this special episode. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care.